Today on Bridges, we're going to talk about single parenting. Welcome to Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter, and I'm glad that you could join us. Today we're going to talk about how to be a confident and successful single parent. And my guest today has her own personal experience as well as professional experience in the area of single parenting. And Linda, I want to welcome you to today's program.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So the name of your book is The Single Parent, Confident and Successful. And the one thing that I hear, Linda, over and over from single parents is, oh gosh, Monica, I feel so guilty. I feel so guilty. Is that a common thread?
Yes, very much so. And we see that a lot. I was a single parent for years myself, raised my children from the time they were 7 and 11. And I certainly didn't feel very confident or successful at that time. At first, I was just so devastated. And my first prayer, I'm so embarrassed, was because I did feel guilty, ashamed, all those things. And my first prayer was, oh God, please don't let Julie get pregnant when she's 15, and don't let Brian get into drugs. Because that was the mindset whenever I went through divorce, that this is what happens to these children. And at some point, the Lord grabbed hold of me and just shook me. And I was like, oh, that poor pitiful prayer. If I go along that line, my children are going to fail. So I turned to the Lord and changed my whole outlook on single parenting. So yes, guilty, ashamed, those are just horrific feelings we have.
Well, and that's something that I hear people say over and over again. And then I hear experts talk about the research and the statistics that talk about, well, kids of single parents don't do as well in school and tend to maybe get into drugs or have early pregnancies. They say that that's what happens when children don't have two parents, and I just feel like so badly for all the people that aren't in a two-parent home where that just isn't possible. And I think, okay, but what are the answers there? So it sounds like even though you call that prayer a pitiful prayer, that God answered by helping you have a fresh perspective.
Yes.
And what is that?
Well, and I talk about this in the book. I think the one situation that the Lord just took me and shook me was, we went to church on Easter Sunday shortly after the divorce, and one of the men was sitting out there with a tripod, and he was taking pictures, and he says, Julie, bring your family over, your mom and brother, and let's get a family picture. And she screamed, we don't have a family. And she went running into the church in the front door, and I was just like, oh my goodness. And then my son said, just as lethal, but he bowed his head, and his little shoulders went down. He goes, Mr. Roger, I guess you don't know, my dad left. We don't have a family anymore. Aww. And he walked in this way. But you know what? My children had just expressed what I had been thinking. And that was right after I prayed that pitiful prayer. And so I went in the church and I sat there and I prayed, and I knew all the statistics. I knew what happened to kids in broken homes, and I determined right then my children were not going to be from a broken home. So we got home that afternoon and I said, we need to talk. I said, we have a family, and it's called a single parent family. And my son said, well, look around, Mom, there's no dad in this home. I said, I know that, son, but you know what? God is going to be the father in our home. We're going to make God the father in our home. And I am so sorry I didn't help you to realize this before. And he said, well, Mom, that's just great, but I need somebody with skin on. And that really caught me off guard.
How old was your son when he said that?
He was like almost 8. And I was like you. I just went, and I was like, God, give me some answers here. And I said, well, Brian, I understand that, but you know what? You can talk to God, and he can talk to you. And he goes, how? I've talked to him, and I don't hear him. So you can hear him through what the preacher says, through music, through just reading your Bible and listening to your heart, and the things I say and other strong Christian people, and God will hear you. And that was really the beginning of our single-parent home. Now, 10 years later, he was in high school, and he was running around with a friend that was getting into a lot of trouble. And I said, Brian, we need to talk. I'm really worried about your friend running around and doing all these things. I'm afraid that you might get in trouble by being with him. He goes, Mother, do you remember 10 years ago when we had that talk about Jesus and God and about God being the Father of our home? I go, yes. He said, well, that night I went to bed. I listened to you, and I went to bed, and I said, God, I need a male friend. I need a special friend. And the next morning, that friend showed up in my class. And I knew that God had sent him for me to have somebody to do boy things with, male things. And he said, I will not desert him now. He needs me right now. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Who knew my son was listening? And who knew that God provided for him all those years? I said, Brian, I trust you. I'm so proud of you, and I trust you to make good decisions.
So he was saying the friend that God sent him to do boy things was this boy that was starting to get in trouble. And he remembered all of that. I think, Linda, so many times we don't realize that our children are as wise and as smart as they are. And I think for any parent that's watching, like whether the single parent is a result of a divorce or some type of broken relationship, sometimes that trauma is so hard on the parent, they're just not able to say those words, or they don't feel like they're able, and like things like discipline and boundaries, like it just feels so chaotic. So for somebody, Linda, who might be feeling like you were feeling, maybe hearing your children say things that you just never wanted them to say.
Right.
We don't have a family anymore. Like, no one dreams about their kids saying those words.
Nope.
How can somebody like step up and say, okay, I'm going to trust God in this situation?
I think first of all, and this may sound crazy, but I think first of all you have to listen to your children. When you're in that state of shock, trying to survive, you don't hear what your children have to say. You know, there's probably 6 months, I don't even know what my children ate. I was so devastated.
Yeah.
And that, like I said, that was the turning point, that moment when my daughter screamed and my son ducked his head, that God really talked to me. And so I tell single parents, first of all, listen to your children. Listen to their heart. See, I think you have to study your children after you're divorced. And I go back to Psalms 139 where it says, you know, God knew us in the womb. He knows when we rise and when we sit. He knows everything about us. Well, we have to look at our children in a new relationship, because before there was a mother and a father. But now you have a different relationship, and your kids are going to meet people that you don't know, and they're going to have strong relationships with these people. So you have to study your children. You have to know when your child rises and when they sit, and you have to develop that intuition for them. Then when you can do that and then couple the scriptures, then you can be a successful single parent. But if you try to do it on your own and you react all the time, that's when your children are going to suffer. That's when your children get in trouble. That's when your children come from a broken home. You're broken, you never heal, and your home never heals.
And that's what none of us want. And I know that none of the parents want that. The name of the book is called The Single Parent, Being Confident and Successful, and it's authored by Linda Ranson Jacobs. And so, Linda, you're saying really that it's not necessarily that the single mom or dad has all the answers. It's that they're willing to listen to their children in spite of their own heartbreak. And one of the other common things that I hear a lot, Linda, are issues of discipline and boundaries. And sometimes that's extra complicated because the other parent is still in the child's life, but there are different rules over here and different rules over there. And what in the world does a person do?
You know, adult children of divorce have told me they feel like the children of Israel because they don't ever know where their bed's going to be, and they're wandering in the desert, you know. But, and I believe that children are adaptable when we work with them, and children are, people always said children are resilient. That's not exactly true. Children are resilient when they have a support system around them. And I call that support system the church. That's how it was in my family. So the single mom has to develop her home, her rules, her boundaries. The single dad has to develop his home, his rules, his boundaries. And a lot of times there's a third party, maybe a stepmom or stepfather. You can only control what goes on in your home. And you have to trust your child. You have to know your child well enough to trust them. So, yeah, we don't have the answers. We just have to, we're just like the two-parent family. We don't have the answers. The only thing is we usually don't have anybody to consult with late at night about what we do about a situation. So we have to consult God.
Yeah. And so tell me about, in your book, how you walk a person through, like how to consult God and listen for that feedback. And are there things that a single parent can do that will help them process, you know, the own breakup of the relationship, if that's the case, and still be a good mom or dad to the children?
Well, I think my personal experience, and the thousands of single parents I worked with, I think when you go through a death We forget a lot of single parents are there because of a death. When you go through a divorce, that you need to get outside help in that. And I work for the organization Church Initiative, and we have divorce care, we have grief share. They're 13-week programs that people can go through, and then divorce care for kids that they can send the children through. When you can go through a God-centered program with people around you, it takes a group to help you heal too, then you're going to be a lot better off. If the church can offer these programs to help you, that's a big thing. The next thing is, I tell a single parent, you might find a scripture that really speaks to you. It can be one verse or something. But you might need to read that for 3, 4, 5 days in a row, because we have so much on our plate. We're parenting alone. We're doing all the chores around the house. We're the drivers for this. We have to work. I mean, our schedules are unbelievable. They start early in the morning and they go to late at night. And so we don't really have a lot of time to sit down and have a long devotion in the morning or evening, whenever. You find 1 or 2 scriptures that speak to you and you read them for days on end. God will begin to speak through those scriptures as to what you need to know. And then you consult other people. You consult Christian friends, a Bible teacher, your pastor, or your divorce care leader to help you work through a situation. I just don't think you can parent alone. The old African proverb or saying that says, it takes a village to raise a child. I think that village is the church. I think that village has to be the church. That's my experience.
Yeah, because no one person can bring everything to the table. It's best, our faith in life is best in community, and especially when there's an extra element of brokenness.
Yes.
And I love what you said about single parents maybe just meditating on a verse for the course of days, because sometimes we make devotions harder than it needs to be.
Yes, ma'am.
Like it needs to be another hour of your time or another this, and and how can you get all that in when you're doing everything? So I love that you've mentioned that. We've got to take a break. We want you to stay with us. When we come back today on Bridges, we're going to continue to talk about how you can be a confident and a successful single parent. We're taking a look into this book, The Single Parent, written by Linda Ranson Jacobs, and we'll be right back.
Don't miss another episode of Bridges. Subscribe to our YouTube channel today, where you can find all of Monica's latest teachings and interviews. It's easy to do. Just visit youtube.com, search Monica Schmelter, and click subscribe. Once you are subscribed, click the bell icon to get notified when a new episode is available to view. Thanks for watching Bridges.
Log on to www.ctntv.org, where you can make a prayer request, view our program guide, see who's on Bridges, or even watch one of Monica's latest teachings. Log on to www.ctntv.org.
Today on Bridges, our focus is the single parent, and we were just before the break talking about having a personal time with the Lord and devotion. And Linda, you said that you really had something you wanted to share, because I think sometimes we heap so much on people about how long a devotional has to be and how many minutes or hours that you need to pray a day. So what do you say about that as somebody who's been a single parent?
Well, and when I became a single parent, people said, now you need to take your children to the Lord and you need to be having a devotion every morning. And I'm like, I don't even have time to have a devotion for myself, let alone my children every morning. And I have a wonderful friend, Rob Rhino, and he said, if you have one devotion a month as a single parent, at the end of the year, you've had 12 devotions. Mm-hmm. If you have one a week, at the end of the year, you have 52 devotions. And I thought, wow, that's so simple, and yet that's what single parents need, something that's simple. So we did, after a while, we got into devotions with my children, and then we were going along really fine, and then my daughter's whole schedule changed when she went to middle school and band and all that stuff. So I just think we have to remember, for a single parent, you have a devotion when you can with your children. And maybe it's in the car, maybe it's going to school. But if you with the wonderful iPhone now, and you can have the Bible on your app on your phone, and you can just have a devotion of Scripture, one a day as you go and as you take your children to the world. But for the single mom, I would get up every morning in the wintertime. I lived in Oklahoma, and I always turned the heater down because I was trying to save money, So I'd get really cold and early in the morning, and I'd turn the heater on, and I would sit downstairs on top of a heater with a blanket around me, and I'd get my tea, and I'd get ready to read my Bible. And 9 times out of 10, I would fall asleep. And my children would get up with me, sleeping. And I felt bad about that for years. And a friend in California, she said, but your children knew that you were trying.
That's right.
And so they knew when they walked downstairs and saw you with the Bible and the tea and the blanket around you that you were trying, and that was a wonderful picture for you to present to them. So I just figured if one day out of the week I got into the scriptures, that was good. I tried. I was just so tired all the time. So I don't heap guilt on single parents. They just do what they can do when they can do it.
Right, and I'm so glad that you said that, Linda, because I think that not only did your kids see that you're trying, God says that He is honored by our faith, and I think that it shows a lot of faith to get up early and turn the heater on and get a blanket and get tea. God sees all of that.
Yes.
And you know, there are parents even that are married to each other and it's a two-parent home and a person still feels like a single parent and they do most of the chores and most of, you know, whatever. And I think for all of us, yes, we need to put the Lord first, but we all do what we can when we can. And at whatever level, that consistency over time counts before God. So I'm so glad that you're not heaping guilt on people who are already suffering.
Well, and you know, God loves the single parent, whether you're a man or a woman, God loves you. There's so many stories in the Bible about the single parent, and I have this one story in my book that I just want to tell you about. It was the widow of Nain, and we don't always hear a lot about some of the single parents in the Bible, but it's such a powerful story, and it's in Luke 7, and it was like soon after Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. And when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." And then he walked up to the coffin. He touched the coffin, he didn't touch the body, and he said to get up and rise. Now, the powerful thing to me in this story is this was an adult man who was taking care of his widowed mother, and Jesus didn't say, "Come and follow me." He didn't take the son from her mother. He gave the son back to her mother because he knew that's how she had to have a living. And the other part of this is God used that story, and everybody in that area knew of God then because this one child was raised. We don't know how God is using your life as a single parent to minister to people in the community. Who knew when I went through a divorce, I would be sitting on a show with a book in my hand that I wrote. I didn't know those things, but God can use any situation that you're in for His glory. And so that's what I love about this little story. It was so powerful to the people around him, and yet it really kind of gets overlooked many times in the Bible, but it's a powerful story.
Well, it's a very powerful story, and to that mom, it meant everything. And to those people in that community, what an example of love and concern. And I think that's important for any of us, at whatever place that we're in life, is that God sees us and that God cares about us. The name of the book that we're looking into today is The Single Parent. And it's about being confident and successful in that role. And I see here, Linda, it talks about improve your child's behavior, negotiate boundaries, graciously seek and accept help. And I think that can be hard sometimes, and trust God in the journey, which is really what you're talking about, how you dared to trust God when you didn't know what life was going to look like or be like. And that's the thing when any of us have a big life change, you know, like a divorce or a separation or death. It's not necessarily what we were planning on.
Right.
And how do we respond? So how do you improve your child's behavior?
Well, you know, when you're a single parent, a lot of people tend to yell, "How come you never? Why don't you ever? How many times have I told you?" And I think we have to step back, and there's a section here where I call replicate God. Every way that Jesus dealt with his disciples, every way that God deals with us is how we should be dealing with our children. And yet we don't.
Right.
We don't use the soft voice. The soft voice that's in control, not the wimpy voices. "Why don't you ever?" But you know what? This morning I asked you to do this, and you did not do this. Therefore, blah, 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 wherever it is. So we have to use a firm voice, an in-control voice, but a soft, gentle voice with these children. I'm sure I messed up and screamed a couple of times. I hate to think of those times, but I had to learn how to parent my children carefully and really get to know them. And my intuition spoke to me many times when they were on the verge of getting in trouble, and I believe I was able to keep them out of getting in trouble, maybe just getting in trouble with me. Maybe that was in my rules.
But really, Linda, what I really hear you saying is that you really worked to have a relationship
Yes.
with your children. And I think for for anybody that is just so helpful, that instead of just seeing ourselves as the rule giver and kid, you are a reflection of me and you're going to behave and you need to do this and you need to do that, you opened up your heart and your ears to know and relate to your children.
Right, you have to get to know your child. It's a different child after you become a single parent than it was before. And there's so many outside influences. So yes, you have to get to know your child. You have to know who their friends are, what they're doing at school. You can do this through eating together. That's an important time. In the car, please turn everything off in the car, because that's when children will talk. When they're riding down the street in the car, if there's nothing else on, they'll begin to talk. And something else I would do, I would say to my kids, so what was the drama at school today? What happened at school today? Because I want to know what their friends were doing. And then I could use those situations like, well, you know what, Billy flunked his spelling test. I was like, well, yeah, let's use that as an example. You know what happens if you don't study and you flunk your spelling test? You know, so I used other children to help me parent my own children. We laughed a lot. Oh my goodness, I remember one time I was chasing them around with a hanger, and they were jumping over couches, and we were, I'm sure
Why were you chasing them with a hanger?
we had watched this movie about this lady that hated hangers. And so there'll be no more wire hangers in my house. And so they were giggling and laughing, and I thought, wow, if the neighbors looked in, they would probably think I was going crazy now. But we laughed, we did silly things together, we did fun things together. One time we had a Planet of the Apes marathon with one of my daughter's friends, and you know, we stayed up all night. It was such a blessing to be invited into that when she was a teenager, and have the Planet of the Apes marathon.
Yes.
You know, forever and ever and ever. But anyway.
Yeah, but how much fun.
Oh, how much fun.
And
right.
that we teach our children that we can have fun and that we can laugh, even if our family looks different than maybe what we hoped or imagined. And that's powerful.
And one thing, do not compete with the other parent. So many parents try to do this through Christmas gifts or fun. Well, he took you to Disneyland, then I'm going to take you over here. You can't compete with the other parent. You do your life. You love your children. And I hope children have relationships with both parents, but sometimes it's not possible. So you do your life, you create your home, and don't even worry or think about the other parent. You do what's right for you and your children.
Yeah, and I think that that's some really wise advice, because I talk to single parents all the time that are competing with the other parent, or that they've become so consumed with thoughts about what's not right over there. And I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about if the child's in physical danger over there or something like that, but gifts or boundaries or what they get to do over there. The thing is, it's not in their control.
Right.
And at some point, we have to believe that the light and that our prayers are more powerful than the darkness, and that kids are gonna, as they get older, they're gonna figure this stuff out.
Right. And as far as disciplining them, well, at Daddy's we get to do this, and then it's in direct contrast with what you do at your home. So I tell parents, and I mentioned in the book, I call it step-back parenting. Don't make any rash decisions unless the child's running into a street or something like that.
Right.
But even regarding the internet and things, I think you have to say to your child, I have to think about this, because otherwise you react. And so my children knew it was going to be at least 24 hours when I got back to them about an issue, and that was a killer for them sometimes to have to wait for what I was going to say. But I wanted to be fair. I was the only parent in my home. So I had some boundaries and I had some rules that we had written down, and they each signed the agreement, so they knew what was coming. And then other things were bargains that we bargained about, and there were other things that were just suggestions that I had for my children. So, you know, step back, think about what you're saying, think about what you're doing. I would never make a decision rash. Either they say, can I go spend the night, or can I go on this trip or whatever. I have to say, I have to have 24 hours advance before I can make a decision. If you don't give me 24 hours, the answer is no, period. The answer is no.
Because the thing of it is, we can't make a good decision in the heat of the moment because we don't have the details. You know, so like sometimes kids get away with X, Y, Z because we just said yes, and since we promised, we can't go back on it. So you call that step back parenting?
Sure, you make your body take a physical step back. If you can't remember, at first you go, step back, I'll have to think about that. That helps you to say, I have to think about that. So it's just, one guy was doing a workshop one time and he said, Ooh, if I used that, I would have had to step back a block last Friday when my son, the police called me about my son. But after we talked through it, he said, "You're right. All I taught my child was to scream and yell in the moment."
Exactly, and to make quick, really bad decisions. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And for sharing today.
Stay tuned. Monica will be right back with closing comments.
Welcome to Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter. I'm glad that you could join us today.
All of these different people united on the same team, praying for each other, blessing each other.
And it was that hope and that faith is why I survived.
When my dad was preaching for a youth revival, and I don't know what happened, still I can't believe it. I was the first person who stood up and walked down the aisle.
He gave me my first Bible, and he opened a window in my life to Christian faith through Jesus Christ.
When you want the Lord to speak to you, it's like you don't know what He's going to tell you.
If we'll be just that one that could step up in faith to say, God, I just trust that you have better than this.
No one else can tell you what you need except God, because He loves us. We're His children.
Do you have a ministry or business? You can contact Nashville's WHTN for studio and programming rates. Visit ctntv.org/studio or call 615-754-0039 for more details.
Today on Bridges, we talked about the single parent and how to be a successful and a confident single parent. And one of the things that Linda talked about was really relying on God for His wisdom, for His strength, for acknowledging that no matter how alone that you might feel or that the road seems to you as a single parent, that God promises that He sees you. And not only does He see you, but that He cares about you and that He cares about His children and that He's promised in His Word to see you through whatever the road of life will have us to travel or to go through. And being able to call upon God for His wisdom, for His strength, for His help is absolutely phenomenal, and it is something that we can all reach out to and receive by faith in our prayers. And one of the tips that Linda offered today, which was so helpful, is what she called step back parenting, where whatever question is thrown your way, like, Mom or Dad, can I go here, can I go there, is, I need to take 24 hours to think about that. And honestly, that would probably help any one of us if it's a big decision. So many times we make decisions quickly. We make decisions without all of the information. I know that I found myself saying, well, if I would have known all that, I would have never agreed to it. So I think that step back parenting could apply really to anything in life. Don't be afraid to take some time to step back, to think things through, to make sure that whatever you say yes to is really what you want to say yes to, and that if you say no, it's what you really want to say no to. So I hope as the single parent you feel encouraged today. We are out of time. We've got to go, so we say goodbye and God bless you.